Now today we're doing something that's very exciting to me, and that's looking at oil filters specifically among the muscle cars. So we have the Mopar filters for the Chargers and the Challengers, the Ford Motorcraft of course for the Mustangs, and the ACDelco for the Camaro and the Corvettes. I'm really excited to do this. I've owned 3 muscle cars in the past, and I'm a big Corvette fan, so I'm really excited to see what's going on here. 2 things very quickly before we begin. I do have to apologize. I'm sort of fighting a cold here, so I may have to break here and there for just to get in some coughs and sneezes. So if it's not very fluid, I do apologize. The second thing is I will add this to our playlist. I'll include that link in the description box below. We've done maybe, I don't even know to be honest, maybe 50 oil filters at Wix XP, Purolator, AmSoil, Napa, so on and so forth. So I'll have that link in the description box if you do want to check out those other filters. Now before we cut open each filter and see what's going on here, I just want to quickly go over 3 points. Number 1, the price point. Number 2 is the type of oil that the manufacturer recommends. And number 3 is how often to change the oil and filter based on the manufacturer. They're all a little bit different. Now every filter here is made in the USA. Regarding the price point, I'm basing this on Amazon. I purchased every filter here off Amazon. I had it within 1 day, and that's pretty typical if you're a Prime member. And I will have links for each filter in the description box below if you want to take a look at them further. But that being said, the Ford is the lowest costing filter here at only $4. Now what's extraordinary with the Ford filter is they include a silicone anti-drainback valve. And I'll talk more about this valve once we cut open the filter. But typically at this price point you will find something called nitrile rubber in terms of the material. And that's pretty average on these lower costing filters. But the fact that you find silicone, that's typically maybe high $6, $7, $8 and more on your oil filter. That's when you start to find silicone anti-drainback valve. So kudos to Ford for including that at such a great price point. That's awesome. The ACDelco here is $8. The Mopar filter is $9. Now what really stands out to me is the Mopar filter. It is enormous. Regarding the diameter, the Ford and the GM filter is 3 inches. The diameter is 3 inches, but the Mopar's 3.625 inches in diameter. Absolutely enormous. Just to give you another view, another sense what we're talking about here. If we weigh each filter, the Mopar filter's 13.8 ounces. It's almost a pound. I mean, it is just so enormous. The ACDelco here is 11.5 roughly. And the Ford, which seems a little bit lighter to me, is 10.3 ounces. Regarding the Ford also, many of you may know about this. If you want more performance, which we'll talk about more a little bit later, but if you want more performance in terms of filtration, they do make a Ford racing filter. It's expensive, and I plan on purchasing a Ford racing filter shortly and comparing these two. But that being said, you have better filtration. But again, they can be close to $20 a pop. Regarding the ACDelco, I expect this to be very, very thick in terms of the canister. In other words, when we cut open every filter, I'm going to measure the canister here, and I expect this to be very, very thick. If you take a look with the GM and the Ford filter, the GM is smaller but weighs more. And the burst pressure on this sucker is 400 PSI. So again, a very, very high number here. Now regarding the type of oil, every manufacturer recommends synthetic motor oil. Now that being said, I do know that these are not just made for muscle cars. These fit a lot of different vehicles. So when I say synthetic, what I typically checked was the Challenger, I checked the Hellcat, Corvette, Camaro, and the Mustang. And everyone recommended synthetic motor oil. Now how often to change it, that's a little bit different. You know, it's sort of interesting. All of these modern vehicles, they use an oil change indicator system, or an indicating system, I should say. So in other words, based on your driving characteristics, you receive a light on the dashboard and it says, please change your oil. And typically within 500 miles of receiving that light, you should change the oil. Now regarding the Ford filter, if that system is no longer working, then what they recommend is to change the oil every 5,000 miles or 6 months. Again, this is if the system is not working. So if you don't receive a light or you have some kind of fault code telling you that this system is no longer working, change the oil every 5,000 miles or 6 months. Now regarding in their manual, they also state never ever go over 10,000 miles or 1 year. Okay, so that's the deal with the Motorcraft. The ACDelco is sort of interesting. They again use a indicator system. However, they state you may have the best driving characteristics. In other words, maybe your car is in the garage a lot, you don't really mash on the accelerator, and you may not receive an indicator after 1 year. And their manual states, although it's past a year and you still do not have an indicator stating to change the oil, never go beyond 1 year. So that's their recommendation. Use their system. However, if you don't receive an indicator, once a year, change the oil and filter. The Mopar is a lot more straightforward. Don't ever exceed 6,000 miles or 6 months. That's it. Simple. So it's sort of interesting on how they all incorporate their own characteristics and how often to change the oil and filter. But very simply, they use this electronic system like most modern vehicles. However, don't ever go past a year. Don't ever go past a year. Don't ever go past 6 months or 6,000 miles. So, that being said, let's cut them open. Now let's start with the basics, and many of you will be happy to see that all three do employ metal end caps, okay, and a metal center tube. Now you may be thinking that is silly. Every filter must have metal end caps and a center tube for strength, but in fact they do not. For example, Walmart SuperTech, very popular filter, less than $3 a lot of times, and they do not have metal end caps, and they employ a nylon core, not a metal core. So not every filter is designed like that, believe it or not. Fram Extra Guard, very similar to Subaru factory oil filters as well, in the sense that they do not have metal end caps. So every filter is a little bit different, but for the most part, I would say 80% you will find metal end caps. Now the other thing that's sort of interesting is the Ford and the Mopar filter regarding the relief valve. Now if we take a look, inside the filter here, there's a relief valve right here. It's built into the filter. Not so with the ACDelco. Now, two functions regarding this relief valve. Number one, if the media ever becomes clogged, this little valve will open up and unfiltered oil will at least get back in the engine. It's a safety device in a sense, so the vehicle is never starved of engine oil. That's number one. Number two, in really cold conditions, this valve may open up so engine oil can get in the engine and circulate. So two functions. However, it's designed a little bit differently regarding the ACDelco. It's built into the stamped piece of steel. So in other words, all three of these have stamped pieces of steel. The whole point behind this is to keep all of the components nice and tight. That's it. Some filters you may find a coil spring, such as K&N, Wix XP, Pennzoil filters. They use a coil spring, but they all have the same function to keep everything nice and tight inside the filter. But regarding ACDelco, the relief valve is built into this stamped piece of steel. So again, if this clogs up or under really cold conditions, this guy opens up and then unfiltered oil gets back in the engine. Very, very simple. Now let's talk about the canisters and the thickness and the weight of them. As I was opening up these filters, the ACDelco by far was the hardest to open up. And take a look at the difference here. Incredibly, incredibly strong, this canister. Now again, the burst pressure for the ACDelco is 400 psi. Very, very high burst pressure. The Mopar is 300 psi. The Motorcraft, I could not dig it up. I looked and looked, just could not find that number. If anyone happens to know, please leave a comment. That would be awesome to find out what that number is. I'm assuming it's pretty much on par with Mopar. The reason why I say that, they both weigh about the same. As you can see, the Ford weighs almost 2.2 ounces. The Mopar is a little bit more at 2.4 ounces. And of course, the GM is the heaviest here at 2.7. But take a look at the thicknesses. The Ford is 21 thousandths of an inch. The Mopar is 22 thousandths of an inch. And then the GM, it has the thickest, of course, at 28 thousandths of an inch. So I'm assuming that the Mopar here, the Motorcraft, is pretty much the same at 300 PSI burst pressure. But again, if anyone knows for sure, please leave that comment. And then to wrap it up, let's quickly talk about the media, the filtration, and of course the anti-drainback valves. Now, you may be thinking all three of these look to be very, very similar, and really they are. They are all derived from cellulose. So for example, with the Ford Motorcraft, this is a blend of cellulose and polyester. Take a look at the spacing. Don't forget, this is a $4 filter. This is nicely made for $4. You do find some overspray in the gluing, but again, for $4 you cannot nitpick. This is, you get a lot for the money, especially with this silicone anti-drainback valve, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, regarding the efficiency and the micron rating, just to give you an idea what we're talking about here, the thickness of a human hair roughly is 30 microns, okay? So very, very small. Now this has an 80% efficiency rating at capturing particles above 20 microns, 80% efficiency, okay? Now you can go above that. For example, Ford Racing, they have an oil filter that has a 99% efficiency. The difference, of course, is the media. They use a fully synthetic media. Other examples would be Wix XP, Amsoil, Royal Purple, Purelator Boss, and Napa Platinum. So these are fully synthetic oil filters. You can even get ones that are wire back. These are not wire back, by the way. Wire backing keeps the rigidity over time. What I will say is I would keep what the manufacturer recommends to retain the warranty. That's something I did notice researching these filters. If you want to retain the factory warranty, run the filter that we recommend. And I would have no reservation running this if I had a brand new Mustang in my garage right now. For $4, especially at that price point, this is quite good. So that's what we have here. Now the parting piece with this filter really is this guy. This is the anti-drainback valve. Now the whole point behind this valve, it retains oil in the filter when you shut off the engine. So the next time you start your vehicle, you don't have a dry start. Now, the difference is the material. Silicone just has a wide band of temperature it can withstand. So this can withstand temperatures down to -75 degrees Fahrenheit and up to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a huge band. Nitrile rubber cannot withstand those type of temperatures over the long run. And this is something I noticed, or I did show recently. This car behind me, I obtained it, and the previous owner had the oil change done at a quick lube place, and they used one of these oil filters, Prime Guard I think it was called, and I opened that filter after 3,000 miles, and it happened to use a rubber anti-drainback valve, and it was really hard, it was brittle. So it's nice to find silicone anti-drainback valves. It is an advantage. It's not a necessity, but it is an advantage finding silicone anti-drainback valves. As far as I can tell, these are nitrile rubber. I don't know for sure. I could not dig it up. Typically, the manufacturer will state proudly that they run silicone. This, I just could not find anything if these are silicone or nitrile rubber. So if anyone knows, please leave a comment. But as far as I can tell, this seems certainly nitrile rubber. The Mopar, I'm 50-50 on it. The thickness, it's quite thick, this anti-drainback valve, and that's why I'm thinking maybe it's silicone, but I don't know for sure. Now regarding the ACDelco, this has a 98% efficiency rating. This filter costs twice as much as the Ford. So this is an $8 filter, but 98% efficiency rating, okay? Again, metal end caps, metal center tube. We went over the bypass valve or the relief valve, and this is, as far as I can tell, again, a rubber anti-drainback valve. The Mopar, this is a blend of cellulose and fiberglass media. I do not know what the efficiency rating is on this. I could not dig it up for this filter. If anyone knows out there, please leave those comments. I try to get everything or as much information that I can. I spend typically a day or so just researching, but I just could not find what the rating is on this. I did notice some comments that This is manufactured by Purolator. Now, I don't think this is made by Purolator. The reason why I say that is it's not the neatest filter. In other words, the spacing. And Purolators are made, they're beautifully made. For example, this is Purolator, the red can. This is their cheapest filter. And take a look at the spacing here. Really nicely made, beautifully made filters, the Purolator filters. But just based on that, I don't think this is made by Purolator. Again, I don't know, to be perfectly honest. But that being said, 6 months, 6,000 miles. You don't want to go beyond that with this filter. And that's pretty much what we have here. What I would take away from this, very, very simply, is that Ford for $4 is an incredible value. The ACDelco is incredibly robust at 400 PSI, and the Mopar is massive, absolutely massive. I'm not going to cut these open. The reason why, I would love to measure and compare the square inches among all three, but I want to use these for future videos. In other words, I want to compare this with the Ford Racing. I want to compare this guy with, I have the ACDelco, same vehicle, both vehicles. I'm sorry, this works on the same vehicles, I should say. Sorry, my throat is getting a little scratchy here, but I got to save that for a later time. But I will promise you this, once I'm done with these filters, I will cut them open, take a measurement on the square inches, and I'll put that in the description box. Okay, so I'll make that promise to you. I just want to do a couple of videos first, and then we'll wrap it up. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.